for November 26th. Chapter 22 of Dracula. Let's go.
Power line to convey a certain brilliance, a telephone line to carry a voice, a metro line to bring us all downtown. Lines of connection, communication, not the borders of boundaries that slice and dice a nation. Divided by the chalk lines of disreputable history, past failures are laid out as we shrug with absent mystery. Those bodies left behind us while we amble on ahead, fearful of the wrong things from newspapers unread. Before I tell you what to do, or you try to tell me, let's all see what's been done and where we could have been. By knowing what's before us, the path might clear ahead, and focus on new obstacles uncharted by the dead. Power line from a gurgling turbine, a telephone line from a quiet room, a metro line from across the city. Maybe we'll all raise our glasses soon. They say across the fence line the grass is always butcherous, but we're not corralling cattle, fearing wranglers, father murders. When we look out past dividers, we're unsurprised to see more folks erecting fences, becoming detainees. Before I worry about you or you worry about me, let's all dwell on ourselves, we're the private enemy. Becoming who we're meant to, virtuous and creative, we won't dread the different, the strange or unrelated. A power line to convey certain brilliance, a telephone line to carry a voice, a metro line to bring us home, to bring us home.
The summer is past, but your days keep growing longer. There's no wind in your sails, but the storm's blowing stronger. Walking hard, standing tall, keeping your head up through it all. Fighting fires, spinning plates. Goodness, how did it get so late? Down and dream. Lay your head down and dream. Lay your head down and dream. Lay Let your mind flow downstream, sprawled out in a moonbeam. Lay your head down and dream. Joe Hills is filmed before a live streaming audience.
That's us. Howdy, y'all. Joe Hills here, recording as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee, and tonight y'all are my live streaming audience. We've got some work to do here on the Pixel Riffs, whatever this is called, server. If you didn't notice, there's some, like, perturbations in the ground here. So I was going to maybe clean this up a little. Now, Pix had asked me to not do the whole road, but I want to get the area immediately around the museum on account of needing to be able to put my new security system in place that will evaluate block placement. So, in short, if we wait until after the security system's turned on to, like, fix this, it'll set off the security system, possibly. Some of these blocks might be close enough to be in range of, like, the nearest sensor. Okay, well, maybe not. That's also fine. We can live and learn. We are going to be reading some Dracula tonight. We are on chapter 22. We've been doing this for 22 weeks, people. 22 weeks of reading Dracula, one chapter at a time. So I am excited about that. It's always a fun time reading Dracula on Saturday night. I posted the Project Gutenberg link earlier, but just in case anybody missed it, I will post that again. Okay. So, that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to be working on our terrain here. We're going to be reading a little Dracula, having just a chill, relaxing Saturday evening. Nobody else is on the server to make mayhem or cause problems or any of that. Chloe the Great and Powerful rolling in and tipping 7 says, the best night of the week. Thank you, Chloe the Great and Powerful. That puts us 13 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. We are currently at, what Joe passed? I think we're at 80%. No, maybe 70. Let me find out. We are currently at 70% Joe Pasty, and yep, we are now 13 away from the next expansion. So thank you, Chloe the Great and Powerful, for that support. Tips, as always, are welcome directly in YouTube via Super Chat or via paypal.me/JoeHills. So, awesome. I think we're ready to get going. If you don't know what's happened in Dracula so far, it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride. We're on chapter 22. It's kind of too late to summarize it. Let's just assume you know most of Dracula from being in the zeitgeist and jump right in. So, here we go. Gotta get my far too serious voice ready. La 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 la. Ho ho ho. Ha ha ho ho. Well, before we do that, though, Percy L. Tips 5, who says, thank you for cultivating such a welcoming and chill community, Joe. Love me some Saturday Dracula. Well, thank you very much, Percy L. That puts us 5 away from the next expansion. Once I actually start reading Dracula, I won't be acknowledging tips until I get to a break in the text. So let's go. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 3rd October. As I must do something, or I will go mad, I write this diary. It is now 6 o'clock, and we are to meet in the study in half an hour and take something to eat. For Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward are agreed that if we do not eat, we cannot work our best. Our best will be, God knows, required day to day. I must keep writing at every chance, for I dare not stop to think. All, big and little, must go down. Perhaps, at the end, the little things may teach us most. That teaching, big or little, could not have landed Mina or me anywhere worse than we are today. However, we must trust and hope. Poor Mina told me just now, with tears running down her dear cheeks, that it is in trouble and trial that our faith is tested, that we must keep on trusting, and that God will aid us up to the end. The end? Oh my God, what end? To work. To work. When Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward had come back from seeing poor Renfield, we went gravely into what was to be done. First, Dr. Seward told us what he and Dr. Van Helsing had gone down to the told us that when he and Dr. Van Helsing had gone down to the room below, they had found Renfield lying on the floor, all in a heap. His face was all bruised and crushed in, and the bones of his neck were broken. Dr. Seward asked the attendant who was on duty in the passage if he had heard anything. He said that he had been sitting down. He confessed to half dozing when he heard voices, loud voices, in the room. And then Renfield had called out loudly several times, "God! God! God!" After that, there was a sound of falling, and when he entered the room, he found him lying on the floor, face down, just as the doctors had seen him. Van Helsing asked if he had heard "voices" or "a voice," and he said he could not say, that at first it seemed to him as if there were two, but as there was no one in the room, it could only have been one. He could swear to it, if required, that the word God was spoken by the patient. Dr. Seward said to us, when we were alone, that he did not wish to go into the matter. The question of an inquest had to be considered, and it would never do to put forward the truth, as no one would believe it. As it was, he thought that on the attendant's evidence, he could give a certificate of death by misadventure in falling from bed. In case the coroner should demand it, there would be a formal inquest, and necessarily to the same result. When the question began to be discussed as to what should be our next step, the very first thing that we decided was that Mina should be in full confidence, that nothing of any sort, no matter how painful, should be kept from her. She agreed as to its wisdom, and it was pitiful to see her, so brave and yet so sorrowful, and in such a depth of despair. There must be no concealment. Alas, we have had too much already, and besides, there is nothing in all the world that can give me more pain than I have already endured, than I suffer now. Whatever may happen, it may be of new hope or of new courage to me. Van Helsing was looking at her fixedly as she spoke, and said, suddenly, but quietly,
"But, dear Madam Mina, are you not afraid, not for yourself, but for others from yourself, after what has happened?"
Her face grew set in its lines, but her eyes shone with the devotion of a martyr as she answered, "No. For me, my mind is made up."
"To what?"
he asked gently, whilst we were all very still, for each in our own way we had sort of a vague idea as to what she meant. Her answer came with direct simplicity, as though she were simply stating a fact. "Because if I find it in myself, and I shall keenly watch for it, a sign of harm to any I love, I shall die."
"You would not kill yourself?"
"I would, if there were no friend who loved me, who would save me such a pain, and so desperate an effort." She looked at him meaningfully as she spoke. He was sitting down, but now he rose and came close to her, and put his hand on her head, and said solemnly, My child, there is such a one. If it were for your good, for myself, I could hold it in my account with God to find such a euthanasia for you, even at this moment, if it were best. Nay, were it safe, but my child. For a moment he seemed choked, and a great sob rose in his throat. He gulped it down and went on. There are here some who would stand between you and death. You must not die. You must not die by any hand. But least of all, by your own, until the other who has fouled your sweet life is true dead. You must not die. For if he is still with the quick undead, your death would make you even as he is. No, you must live. You must struggle and strive to live, though death would seem a boon unspeakable. You must fight death himself, though he come to you in pain or in joy, by the day or the night, in safety or in peril. On your living soul, I charge you that you do not die, nay, nor think of death, till this great evil be past. The poor dear grew white as death, and shock and shivered, as I have seen a quicksand shake and shiver at the incoming of the tide. We were all silent. We could do nothing. At length she grew more calm, turning to him, said sweetly, but oh, so sorrowfully, as she held out her hand, I promise you, my dear friend, that if God will let me live, I shall strive to do so, till, if it may be in his good time, this horror may have passed from me. She was so good and brave that we all felt that our hearts were strengthened to work and endure for her, and we began to discuss what we were to do. I told her that she was to have all the papers in the safe, and all the papers or diaries and phonographs we might hereafter use, and was to keep the record as she had done before. She was pleased with the prospect of anything to do, if pleased could be used in connection with so grim an interest. Hey, we got another tip rolling in. Thank you very much to VampGator for tipping 20, who says, a tip for telling the story of one of my overdramatic cousins. Well, that's going to get us, boom, 12 past our next face camera expansion milestone. So here we go. It's time to expand Joe's. We're at the most obnoxious face camera size now, the Tony Stark helmet cam. But don't worry, we are only $8 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here. How am I reading and playing? I'm doing neither very well. I'm having to take a lot of breaks on both. Let me take a sip of my drink, too, while we're in this brief intermission here. Yeah, I read chat and play games all the time. It's similar. The only thing is that when I do the Van Helsing, I have to flex my muscles, so I can't... Because to get the Strongman vibrato, I have to flex so hard that my body vibrates to do the Van Helsing voice properly. So, okay. As usual, Van Helsing had thought ahead of everyone else and was prepared with an exact ordering of our work. It is perhaps well that at our meeting after our visit to Carfax, we decided not to do anything
with the earth boxes that lay there. Had we done so, the Count must have guessed our purpose, and would doubtless have taken measures in advance to frustrate such an effort with regard to others. But now he does not know our intentions. Nay, more in all probability, he does not know that such a power exists to us as can sterilize his layers, so that he cannot use them as of old. We are now so much further advanced in our knowledge as to their disposition, that when we have examined the house in Piccadilly, we may track the very last of them. Today, then, is ours, and in it rests our hope. The sun that rose on our sorrow this morning guards us in its course. Until it sets tonight, that monster must retain whatever form he now has. He is confined within the limitations of his earthly envelope. He cannot melt into thin air. Oh, it's getting dark. I was looking at the ground. I did not realize we were about to have mobs off us. Our security system is coming along. Anyway. If he go through a doorway, he must open the door like a mere mortal. And so we have this day to hunt out all his layers and sterilize them. So we shall, if we have not yet catch him and destroy him, drive him to bay in some place where the catching and destroying shall be in time sure. Here I started up, for I could not contain myself at the thought that the minutes and seconds so preciously laden with Mina's life and happiness were flying from us, since whilst we talked, action was impossible. But Van Helsing held up his hand warningly. Nay, friend Jonathan, in this the quickest way home is the longest way, so your proverbs say. We shall all act, and act with desperate quick, when the time has come. But think, in all probable, the key of the situation is in that house in Piccadilly. The Count may have many houses which he has bought. Of them he will have deeds of purchase, keys, and many other things. He will have paper that he write on. He will have his book of checks. There are many belongings that he must have somewhere. Why not in this place, so central, so quiet, where he come and go by the front or back at all hour, when in the very vast of traffic there is none to notice? We shall go there and search that house, and when we learn what it holds, then we do what our friend Arthur Call, in his phrases of hunt, stop the earths, and so we run down our old fox. So is it not? Then let us come at once. Why are we wasting the precious time? The professor did not move, but simply said, And how are we to get into that house in Piccadilly? Anyway, we shall break in if need be. And your police, where will they be? What will they say? I was staggered, but I knew that if he wished to delay, he had a good reason for it. So, I said, as quietly as I could, "Don't wait more than need be. You know, I'm sure what torture I am in."
"Ah, my child, that I do. And indeed there is no wish for me to add to your anguish. But just think, what can we do until all the world be at movement? Then will come our time. I have thought, and it seems to me the simplest way is best of all. Now we wish to get into the house, but we have no key. Is it not so?"
I nodded.
"Now suppose that you were, in truth, the owner of that house, and could still not get in, and think there was to you no conscience of the housebreaker. What would you do?"
"I should get a respectable locksmith and set him to work to pick the lock for me."
"And your police, they would interfere, would they not?"
"No, not if they knew the man was properly employed."
"Then all that is in doubt is the conscience of the employer and the belief of your policeman as to whether or not that employer has a good conscience or a bad one. Your police must indeed be zealous men and clever, oh so clever, in reading the heart, that they trouble themselves in such matters. No, my friend Jonathan. You go, take the lock of 100 empty house in this your London, or of in any city in the world, and if you do it, as such things are rightly done, and at the time such things are rightly done, no one shall interfere. I have read of a gentleman who owned so fine a house in London, and when he went for months of summer in Switzerland and lock up his house, some burglar came and broke window at back and got in. Then he went and made open the shutters in front and walk out and in through the door before the very eyes of the police. Then he have an auction in that house and advertise it and put up big notice. And when the day come, he sell off by a great auctioneer all the goods of that other man who owned them. Then he go to a builder, and he sell him that house, making an agreement that he pull it down and take away all within a certain time. And your police and other authority help him all he can. And when that owner come back from his holiday in Switzerland, he find only an empty hole where his house had been. This was all done en règle, and in our work we shall be en règle too. We shall not go so early that the policemen who have then little to think of shall deem it strange, but we shall go after 10 o'clock, when there are many about, and such things would be done were we indeed the owners of the house.
I could not but see how right he was, and the terrible despair of Mina's face became relaxed a thought. There was hope in such good counsel. Van Helsing went on.
When once within that house, we may find more clues. At any rate, some of us can remain here, whilst the rest find the other places where there be more earth boxes. At Bermondsey and Mile End. Lord Godalming stood up. I can be of some use here. I shall wire to my people to have horses and carriages where they will be most convenient. Look here, old fella. It is a capital idea to have all ready in case we want to go horsebacking. But don't you think that one of your snappy carriages, with its heraldic adornments, in a byway of Walworth or Mile End, would attract too much attention for our purposes? It seems to me we ought to take cabs when we go south or east, and even leave them nowhere near the neighborhood where we're going to. Friend Quincy is right! His head is what you call in plane with the horizon. It is a difficult thing we go to do, and we do not want no people to watch us, if so it may. Mina took a growing interest in everything, and I was rejoiced to see that the exigency of affairs was helping her to forget, for a time, the terrible experience of that night. She was very, very pale, almost ghastly, and so thin that her lips were drawn away, showing her teeth in somewhat of prominence. I did not mention it, lest it should give her needless pain, but it made my blood run cold in my veins to think of what had occurred with poor Lucy when the Count had sucked her blood. As yet, there was no sign of the teeth growing sharper, but the time, as yet, was short, and there was time for fear. When we came to the discussion of the sequence of our efforts and of the disposition of our forces, there were new sources of doubt. It was finally agreed that before starting for Piccadilly, we should destroy the Count's lair close at hand. In case he should find it out too soon, we should thus be still ahead of him in our work of destruction, and his presence in his purely material shape, and at his weakest, might give us some new clue. As to the disposal of forces, it was suggested by the professor that after our visit to Carfax, we should all enter the house in Piccadilly, that the two doctors and I should remain there, whilst Lord Godalming and Quincy found the lairs at Walworth and Mile End and destroyed them. It was possible, if not likely, the professor urged, that the Count might appear in Piccadilly during the day, and that if so, we might be able to cope with him then and there. At any rate, we might be able to follow him in force. To this plan, I strenuously objected, and so far as my going was concerned, for I said I needed to stay and protect Mina. I thought my mind was made up on the subject. But Mina would not listen to my objection. She said there might be some law matter in which I might be useful, that amongst the Count's papers there might be some clue that I could understand out of my experience in Transylvania, and that, as it was, all the strength that we could muster was required to cope with the Count's extraordinary power. I had to give in, for Mina's resolution was fixed. She said it was the last hope for her that we should all work together. As for me, I have no fear. Things have been as bad as they can be, and whatever may happen must have in it some element of hope or comfort. Go, my husband. God can, if he wishes it, guard me as well alone as with anyone present.
So I started up, crying out, "Then in God's name, let me come at once, for we are losing time. The Count may come to Piccadilly earlier than we think." "Not so," said Van Helsing, holding up his hand. "But why?" "Do you forget that last night he banqueted heavily, and will sleep late?" Did I forget? Shall I ever? Can I ever? Can any one of us forget that terrible scene? Mina struggled hard to keep her brave countenance, but the pain overmastered her, and she put her hands before her face and shuddered whilst she moaned. Van Helsing had not intended to recall her frightful experience. He had simply lost sight of her and her part in the affair in his intellectual effort. When it struck him what he had said, he was horrified at his thoughtlessness and tried to comfort her. "Oh, Madam Mina! Dear Madam Mina! Alas, that I, of all who so reverence you, should have said anything so forgetful! These stupid old lips of mine and this stupid old head do not deserve so. But you will forget it, will you not?" He bent low beside her as he spoke. She took his hand, and looking at him through her tears, said hoarsely, "No, I shall not forget, for it is well that I remember, and with it I have so much memory of you that is sweet, and I take it all together. Now, you must be going soon. Breakfast is ready, and we must all eat, that we may be strong." Breakfast was a strange meal to us all. We tried to be cheerful and encourage each other, and Mina was the brightest and most cheerful of all of us. When it was over, Van Helsing stood up and said, "Now, my dear friends, we go forth to our terrible enterprise. Are we all armed as we were on the night we first visited our enemy's lair? Armed against ghostly as well as carnal attack?" We all assured him. "Then it is well. Now, Madam Mina, you are in any case quite safe here until the sunset, and before then we shall return. We shall return, but before we go, let me see you armed against personal attack. I have myself, since you came down, prepared your chamber by the placing of things which we know, so that he may not enter. Now let me guard yourself. On your forehead I touch this piece of sacred wafer, in the name of the Father, the Son, and..." There was a fearful scream, which almost froze our hearts to hear. As he had placed the wafer on Mina's forehead, it had seared it, had burned into flesh as though it had been a piece of white-hot metal. My poor darling's brain had told her the significance of the fact as quickly as her nerves received the pain of it, and the two so overwhelmed her that her overwrought nature had its voice in that dreadful scream. But the words to her thought came quickly. The echo of that scream had not ceased to ring in the air when there came the reaction, and she sank on her knees on the floor in an agony of abasement, pulling her beautiful hair over her face. As the leper of old his mantle, she wailed out, "Unclean! Unclean! Even the Almighty shuns my polluted flesh. I must bear the mark of shame upon my forehead until the judgment day." They all paused. I had thrown myself beside her in an agony of helpless grief, and putting my arms around her, held her tight. For a few minutes our sorrowful hearts beat together, whilst the friends around us turned away their eyes that ran tears silently. Then Van Helsing turned and said gravely, so gravely that I could not help feeling that he was, in some way, inspired, and was stating things outside himself.
It may be that you have to bear that mark till God himself see fit, as he most surely shall, on Judgment Day, to redress all wrongs of the earth and of his children that he has placed thereon. And oh, Madam Mina, my dear, may we who love you be there to see, when that red scar, that sign of God's knowledge of what has been, shall pass away, and leave your forehead as pure as the heart we know. For so surely as we live, that scar shall pass away, when God sees right to lift the burden that is hard upon us. Till then, we bear our cross, as his Son did in obedience to his will. It may be that we are chosen instruments of his good pleasure, and that we ascend to his bidding, as that other, through stripes and shame, through tears and blood, through doubts and fears, and all that makes the difference between God and man.
There was hope in his words, and comfort, and they made for resignation. Mina and I both felt so, and simultaneously, we each took one of the old man's hands and bent over and kissed it. Then, without a word, we all knelt down together, and all holding hands, swore to be true to each other. We men pledged ourselves to raise the veil of sorrow from the head of her whom each in his own way we loved, and we prayed for help and guidance in the terrible task which lay before us. It was then time to start. So I said farewell to Mina, a parting which neither of us shall forget, to our dying day, and we set out. To one thing I have made up in my mind. If we find out that Mina must be a vampire in the end, then she shall not go into that unknown and terrible land alone. I suppose it is thus that in old times one vampire meant many, just as their bodies could only lay in sacred earth, so the holiest love was the recruiting sergeant for their ghastly ranks. We entered Carfax without trouble, and found all things the same as on the first occasion. It was hard to believe amongst so prosaic surroundings of neglect and dust and decay there was any ground for fear, such fear as already we knew. Had our minds not been made up, and had there not been terrible memories to spur us on, we could have hardly proceeded with our task. We found no papers, or any sign of use of the house, and in the chapel the great boxes looked just as we had seen them last. Dr. Van Helsing said to us, solemnly, as we stood before them,
"And now, my friends, we have a duty here to do. We must sterilize this earth, so sacred, of holy memories, that he has brought from a far distant land for such fell use. He has chosen this earth because it has been holy. Thus we defeat him with his own weapon, for we make it more holy still. It was sanctified to such use of man. Now we sanctify it to God." As he spoke, he took from his bag a screwdriver and a wrench, and very soon the top of one of the cases was thrown open. The earth smelled musty and close,
but we did not somehow seem to mind, for our attention was concentrated on the professor. Taking from his box a piece of the sacred wafer and laying it reverently on the earth, and then shutting down the lid, began to screw it home, we aiding him as he worked. One by one, we treated in the same way each of the great boxes, and left them as we had found them to all appearance, but in each was a portion of the host. When we closed the door behind us, the professor said solemnly,
"So much is already done, if it may be that with all the others we can be so successful, then the sunset of this evening may shine on Madam Mina's forehead, all white as ivory, and with no stain."
as we passed across the lawn on our way to the station to catch our train. We could see the front of the asylum. I looked eagerly, and in the window of my own room saw Mina. I waved my hand to her and nodded to tell that our work there was successfully accomplished. She nodded in reply to show that she understood. The last I saw, she was waving her hand in farewell. It was with a heavy heart that we sought the station and caught the train, which was steaming in as we reached the platform. I have written this on the train. And that ends that segment. There's a little bit more. The journal continues, but before we get there, I figure I should go ahead and make sure we're all caught up on things. Looks like we haven't had any tips roll in. Just as a quick reminder, we are now still $8 away from the next Face Camera expansion. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/Joe Hills and YouTube Super Chat. Jill Jackson says, y'all are way too thirsty. Yeah, I'm thirsty. I really need to have something to drink. I have been talking. All that Van Helsing voice really works up thirst. I also need to blow my nose. Let me mute for a second. Gotta have clear sinuses for that Van Helsing voice. But yeah, hydration, it's key. Okay, so they were able to clear one of the sites. That's probably a good sign. Or is it? We'll have to see, I guess. Okay, so placing these blocks is definitely setting off the security system. So, see, clearly we did need to have, something here. So, probably going to want to clear all this out, actually. So, we haven't worked out the exact location we're going to have all the fancy redstone and stuff in. But that's kind of hard to do while I'm reading, so we're just going to stick with the general cleaning here. Let me move the chair a little forward. Hopefully that's not messing with the camera too much. Okay, good. We're still at the 60% Joe Pasky, Tony Stark helmet cam. I got to say, I am actually overheating. This doing that Van Helsing voice, all the posing and stuff, actually, I start overheating. It's a lot of movement. Way more than usual. Okay. So, okay. So the next bit opens Piccadilly, 12:30 o'clock. 12:30 o'clock. That's funny because in England, I guess you might say 12:30 o'clock, but you would never say 12:30 o'clock in American or U.S. English. You just say 12:30 or 12:30. You might say 12 o'clock, but you wouldn't, if it was 12:30, you wouldn't say 12 o'clock and a half or something. Okay. Whew. I was gonna say I need to stretch, but I've been stretching too much. Just move my arms a little wiggle, get a little wiggle in here, because I've been doing all the flexing, but I haven't done it a little. It's just like loosey-goosey moving around. Okay, cool. Piccadilly, 12:30 o'clock. Just before we reached Fenchurch Street, Lord Godalming said to me, "Quincy and I will find a locksmith. You had better not come with us in case there should be any difficulty, for, under the circumstances, it wouldn't seem so bad for us to break into an empty house. But you are a solicitor, and the Incorporated Law Society might tell you that you should have known better." I demurred as to my not sharing any danger of odium, but he went on. "Besides, it will attract less attention if there are not too many of us. My title will make it all right with the locksmith, and with any policeman that may come along. You had better go with Jack and the professor and stay in the Green Park, somewhere in sight of the house. And when you see the door opened and the smith has gone away, do you all come across. We shall be on the lookout for you, and shall let you in."
The advice is good,
said Van Helsing. And so we said no more. Godalming and Morris hurried off in a cab. We followed in another. At the corner of Arlington Street, our contingent got out and strolled into the Green Park. My heart beat as I saw the house on which so much of our hope was centered, looming up grim and silent in its deserted condition amongst its more lively and spruce-looking neighbors. We sat down on a bench within good view and began to smoke cigars so as to attract as little attention as possible. The minutes seemed to pass with leaden feet as we waited for the coming of others. At length, we saw a four-wheeler drive up. Out of it, in leisurely fashion, got Lord Godalming and Morris, and down from the box descended a thick-set working man with his rush-woven basket of tools. Morris paid the cabman, who touched his hat, and drove away. Together, the two ascended the steps, and Lord Godalming pointed out what he wanted done. The workman took off his coat, and then sauntered along. The policeman nodded acquiescence, and the man, kneeling down, placed his bag beside him. After searching through it, he took out a selection of tools, which he produced to lay beside him in an orderly fashion. Then he stood up, looked into the keyhole, blew into it, and, turning to his employers, made some remark. Lord Godalming smiled, and the man lifted a good-sized bunch of keys, selecting one of them, and began to probe the lock, as if feeling his way with it. After fumbling about for a bit, he tried a second, and then a third. All at once, the door opened under a slight push from him, and he and the two others entered the hall. We sat still. My own cigar burnt furiously, but Van Helsing's went cold altogether. We waited patiently as we saw the workman come out and bring in his bag. Then he held the door partly open, steadying it with his knees, whilst he fitted a key to the lock. This he finally handed to Lord Godalming, who took out his purse and gave him something. The man touched his hat, took his bag, put on his coat, and departed. Not a soul took the slightest notice of the whole transaction. When the man was fairly gone, we three crossed over the street and knocked at the door. It was immediately opened by Quincy Morris, beside whom stood Lord Godalming lighting a cigar. "This place smells so vilely," said the latter as we came in. It did indeed smell vilely, like the old chapel at Carfax, and with our previous experience,
It was plain to us that the Count had been using the place pretty freely. We moved to explore the house, all keeping together in case of attack, for we knew we had a strong and wily enemy to deal with, and as yet we did not know whether the Count might not be in the house. In the dining room, which lay at the back of the hall, we found 8 boxes of earth. 8 boxes only out of the 9 which we sought. Our work was not over, and would never be until we should have found the missing box. First, we opened the shutters of the window, which looked out across a narrow stone-flagged yard at the blank face of a stable, pointed to look like the front of a miniature house. There were no windows in it, so we were not afraid of being overlooked. We did not lose any time in examining the chests. With the tools which we had brought with us, we opened them one by one and treated them as we had treated the others in the old chapel. It was evident to us that the Count was not present in the house, and we proceeded to search for any of his effects. After a cursory glance at the rest of the rooms, from basement to attic, we came... Wait, hold on. Sorry. After a cursory glance at the rest of the rooms, from basement to attic, we came to the conclusion that the dining room contained any effects which might belong to the Count, and so we proceeded to minutely examine them. They lay in a sort of orderly disorder on the great dining room table. There were title deeds of the Piccadilly house in a great bundle, deeds of the purchase of the houses at Mile End and Bermondsey, note paper and envelopes and pens and ink. All were covered up with wrapping paper to keep them from the dust. There was also a clothes brush, a brush and comb, and a jug and basin, the latter containing dirty water, which was reddened as if with blood. Last of all was a little heap of keys of all sorts and sizes, probably those belonging to other houses. When we had examined this last find, Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris, taking accurate notes of the various addresses of the houses in the east and south, took with them the keys in a great bunch, and set out to destroy the boxes in these places. The rest of us are, with what patience we can, waiting their return, or the coming of the Count. And that ends chapter 22 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. Chapter 23 starts next week. Next Saturday, we're going to read chapter 23. It's I think there's 26 chapters in all. So we're getting to the end here, folks. We're getting to the end of Dracula. Oh, it looks like there's 27 chapters. Okay, so we're not quite to the end. And hey, Unlimited Creativity is rolling in and tipping 8. That's going to get us to our next Face Camera Expansion milestone, who says, in no way am I suggesting you or anyone in the chat be less obnoxious, but it's time to move past the helmet cam. I'm always happy to move past the helmet cam. Here we go. It's time to expand Jost. Do. We are now at the T. Joe Eckhillsberg, lowering that Joe opacity to 50%. So thank you, Unlimited Creativity. Also, we got another tip rolling in here via PayPal from Carl for 65. So thank you very much, Carl, for that. So let's see, that's going to get us 1 face camera expansion, 2 face camera expansions, 3 face camera expansions, and 15 away from the one beyond that. So here we go. It's time to expand Jost. Do. Lowering the Joe opacity now to 42%. Numero dos, even larger Jost. Lowering the Joe opacity now to a frigid 32% Fahrenheit. And then numero tres, even larger spectral face. La da da da. And then we are going to
Lower the opacity now to 24%. So thank you very much to Carl for that. And then we were 15 away from the next expansion. And we got some more tips that rolled in too. Kingu, tips 8, who says, thanks for the riveting reading and entertainment. Grow Hills. Yes, indeed. That puts us 8 away now for the next expansion. And good news, Bark It Up, a.k.a. Janie Laney, rolling in and tipping 10. Thank you, Janie Laney. So that is actually going to get us... Wait, did I do my math right? Yeah, that's going to get us 3 past our next phase camera expansion milestone. So here we go. Expand Joost. Do-do-do-do. And we're going to lower the opacity now to... Where'd I find my face? 20%. Da-da-da-da. So thank you, Janie Laney, Kingu, Carl, Unlimited Creativity. And let's make sure we didn't miss any more. Looks like y'all really enjoyed that last bit of the story there. A bunch of tips all rolling in at once. Very kind of you. Okay. So, we're kind of just generally filling in the area here, such as we may. Hello, faint eyeball, writes Janie Laney. I'm not fainting. I had dinner earlier. And I vaguely remembered to hydrate occasionally. I should take more sips of this. Okay. So, let's see. Boy, so we've been going for a full hour now. I did a 2.5 hour stream earlier today, and so... on the one hand, I'm like, I should keep going. But on the other hand, I'm also like, oh boy, am I going to start making stupid, tired mistakes soon? I feel like I am. I'm nervous about trying to do the redstone at this point. But I think I'm doing a good job of filling this all in. Oh, this is not filled in yet. I need to just generally fill in the parts around here. That might set off these security sensors. Let's just kind of have that come along here. Kind of give it a little bit more of a fade to it than it has. Okay. I have been having a good weekend, Janie. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun hanging out with family and stuff. Had a lot of time outside. My parents have like a little fire pit, so got to hang out with a real campfire. It was nice. Let's see. So we've cleaned up the 3 major crime scenes here. What we haven't done is fixed all of the holes in the building. So like this. Like there's a lot of hole here. Like there's a lot of wall that's maybe missing here that we need to replace. That we let get skulked in. Pix can kind of fix that himself later to optimize it. Maybe, but that's not my shovel. But I was gonna say, let's maybe smooth that out a bit as well. This feels kind of like, this feels way too sharp here. I don't know what Pix's plan is with this road. Oh, come on. Look at this. What are these guys doing? Look at these goofs. What a bunch of goofs. I can't kill them anywhere near here because there might still be, they're going in the museum. Okay, we need to leave so that they can despawn, because if I kill them, there might be still skulk. Pixel told me not to kill anything near here. Do I have a boat for the bannerman? Why would I have a boat? Yeah, this does kind of look like a security breach, doesn't it? Do they despawn if I walk away, though? I'm optimistic that they do. Okay. Yay! Victory! So this is seeming pretty solid. Let's go look at our list. We had a list of stuff to work on, and some of it was easier than other stuff. Now that I'm pretty brain dead at the end of the night, I don't want to work on it. Oh yeah. Here's the security system so far. We placed the sensors. We've acquired more sensors. We placed the sensors. We haven't wired them yet. We haven't placed the gravel observer column. We haven't concealed the observer column. We have fixed the skulk damage, and we have not cleaned up the attic. So cleaning up the attic and cleaning up the basement are kind of the two things that I maybe could do if I was done with the other stuff. This is going to be a very loud place to hang out. Because the idea was that we wanted all these skulks to shriek if somebody like tried to land on the roof and looked in the windows. And they're like, I'll be sneaky and I'll land on the roof. Yeah, they'd be like, oh, and I'm going to put a bunch of redstone in there too. But I feel like that's a tomorrow morning thing. That's like a when I'm awake thing. Yeah. We got through the chapter of Dracula, and I haven't broken anything that's going to take an hour for me to fix. I can definitely tell I'm at the point where if I keep playing, I'm going to either screw something up or do something stupid that's going to cost more time to fix than it was worth trying to work on. So I think we're going to wrap up for tonight. Who am I following on Twitch? Bum 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 dun dun. Let's see. Oh, lots of people. Well, it looks like... Well, most of them are playing games that I don't really know. So... Oh, I know Iron Maiden. It looks like Seraph is playing the Iron Maiden pinball machine, so... Why don't we go ahead? This one shows up in tournaments I play in all the time. So we're going to go ahead and raid Seraph. If you like the band Iron Maiden, this is a pretty cool pinball machine. Even if you don't. Like, I have a lot of fun playing this one when it comes up in tournaments and stuff. So when you get over there, our raid message is, howdy y'all, Joe Hill's raid here. Anyway, thanks for hanging out for Dracula. Thanks for tipping. Thanks for palling around. Until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Keep adventuring. Do 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 do.